I was just trying to figure out how to start this video. All my predictions have gone down the drain. I have to eat my own words. So that Lewis is going to go back to back. He flopped. Ranked Hulk as the third best driver on the mid-season reviews. He's just flipped, flopped, slipped and messed throughout the weekend. So that Lando's gonna flop and not have a great race, and he might have many other tweaking issues. But guess what? Lando won the race, Lewis is 8th, and someone else beat Verstappen in his own backyard. Let's get into the Dutch Grand Prix Race Digest. Welcome, you beautiful people. My name's Lucky. You guys know why you're here. We're here to talk about the sport that you and I love. Just finished watching the Grand Prix. Couldn't wait to get on and do this video. Let's get into it. I think everything sets up from qualifying, right? So there were a few massive headlines. Lando's lap was astonishing. The way he found 310s, almost 410s over Verstappen was the first marker in the sand and the statement over the weekend that Lando put down to say, hey, do you know what? I'm back. I'm going to win this. And hearing from Andrea Stella, seems like they still think that the Drivers' Championship is still on the cards. After today's performance, I bet it is, right? The two other significant items from a qualifying perspective was that I think Williams' upgrade did work. Albon smashed in a lovely lap. Unfortunately got disqualified. The final point is Lewis and Sainz getting kicked out in Q2. So you have a grid that is the expected front row or couple of rows with Lando, Verstappen, Oscar and Russell. However, you have Lewis and Sainz starting out of position. That set out the tone for the Dutch Grand Prix. So let's get into the race. I think, interestingly, Lando had so much pressure about all of these questions about the starts and whether he's a championship material. I think the start was suboptimal today, but looking at the onboards and based on the commentary from Julian Palmer on F1 TV, there was no actual issue in terms of the procedure that Lando actually executed. May it be the actual way that they've pinned the clutch and programmed the drop versus the Red Bull, right? So that aside, Lando kept up with Verstappen. I think on his post-race quick interview before the podium, he mentioned, oh, he was expecting Max to pull away, but around lap 5, he knew that he's got the Grand Prix on it. But I think the best part was the overtake on Max, wonderful. But the cherry on the top was that Lando pushed the car to its ultimate limit on the last lap. Yes, he did mention complete deployment on the cooldown room, but it's impressive to have seen a 44-lap-old hard tyre to have been pushed to that level to gain that last point, right? And another impressive fact was that Lando managed to pull in 20 seconds of a gap to Max Verstappen. That's a statement of dominance that we used to see from Red Bull. I can't wait for the rest of the season to see how Lando and Verstappen turn out. In summary, Lando's drive was a champion's drive, amazing statement, well managed, and a deserved winner. McLaren was definitely the fastest car, right? Let's go to second place. Max was beaten in his own home turf for the first time. Probably been a very hard pill to swallow, but he accepted the fact that they were the second fastest car and he maximized again, right? Yes, mathematically, with the fastest lap, Lando doesn't now have to win all the races. And I think, honestly, the championship may be back on if this is the level of dominance that we're going to expect, right? The gap's down to 70 points from 78, and Max settled for second. Another standout drive was definitely Charles, right? I think on the day, probably looking at the last few laps of the second stint, Charles was marginally faster than Max. So that would have mean that the Ferrari and the Red Bull was more or less the second fastest car on the day. And I think that's a real good turn of events for Ferrari. And personally, I'm a bit happy as well because Lewis is going to Ferrari next year. But that's beside the point. Charles ran an absolutely magnificent race. Firstly, to get Sergio off the line, given that we all know that this track is going to be relatively hard to overtake. But then I think the second masterclass came both in combination with the driver and the team to have undercut Russell and Oscar. I honestly thought with the tyre deficit that Oscar would have flown by, but Charles had the pace to maintain the gap and not allow the tyre advantage and DRS to make a difference. So wonderful drive, good for the confidence of Ferrari, good for the confidence of Charles, and getting back-to-back podiums from Spa and after the season, right? So that wraps up your podium. So number 4 was Oscar. I think Oscar had a relatively off day. In the first stint, I think he wasn't able to necessarily put pressure on Russell. So the only expectation was an alternative strategy, i.e. going long, really, right? So was the Merc fast on the mediums? I think so, but not as fast as the McLaren. So I think something was wrong in terms of how Oscar, either whether it's the setup, whether it was tire temperature, whether the car didn't feel fine, something was off really, right? So I don't think Oscar was on his game today per se, at least on the first stint. When he did get some clear air, he did show some pace. And the second stint, I think, was a bit lost after he very easily overtook Russell, where there was a massive tire delta. But once he got back up to Charles, yes, there were really snappy moments between the both of them, but he couldn't put enough pressure to overtake Charles. And then Charles was also, as we just mentioned, relatively flawless across his drive, no mistakes, so that Oscar didn't have the opportunity to capitalize, right? So that meant where potentially McLaren could have secured a 1-2 at a minimum, a 1-3 or double podium, they had to settle for a 1-4. Either way, they've dug into the constructors' lead again and brought it down further. But I think it wasn't the day for Oscar. Number 4, Sainz. I think another relatively good race day. Qualifying was not necessarily the best, but then again, you have this rationale of he really didn't get any practice. So setup could have been off, the car might have not been well balanced. So I think based on where he started from, i.e. I think 10th or 11th, to have overtaken Perez on track, I think that was a maximized drive also from Sainz, given the circumstances of the weekend. If Sainz was to have taken part in all the practices, I would have questioned how good the drive was, but given the circumstances, I think amazing. Number 6, Perez. Oh, I don't know. Again, I don't think it's maximized, but it's not as bad as you would have expected. Top 5 qualification, finished top 6. Max was second and 20 seconds behind. So I think it's a mediocre drive, which isn't, well, I think an average drive. That's really it. Then you got the Mercedes boys, 7th and 8th. I think, I'm not really sure what happened to Russell, because I think they just gave up 2 positions. Either thinking that Sainz would definitely catch up and his hard tire was completely falling off, or the pace with the hard tire was not enough. But I think the summary of the race was that Mercedes cemented themselves as the 4th best car on the day. And from Lewis's perspective, finished 8th. I think he made decent moves with the soft tire, took the hard tire as much as he could, and then on the last stint with the soft, he almost got to DRS range with Russell. So I don't know, 14-8, a good race day, a really bad qualifying day. And then last of the points goes to Gasly and Alonso. I think Gasly did a really good job in that Alpine to salvage 2 points, and then Aston Martin just kind of finished off with the last point, right? Anything massive out of the ordinary in that space? I don't really think so. Gasly went for a tyre offset, seems like it paid off. I think the only sad part was I think we didn't really see the true pace of the Williams. Could have potentially be point contenders today, but we'll have to see on the next race, right? So that's your top 10, and I think those are the kind of real highlights over the course of the day. And finishing thoughts, I think one thing I did want to mention was the 5-car battle. I think whenever there's Kev and a massive DRS train, and you just have like 4 cars trying and overtaking you, that was a bit of an exciting event. All right, so to sum up, who are the bangers and blunders of the drives over the course of the weekend? I think comparing both quali and race pace, one of the best bangers of the weekend was Norris. Number 2, Charles, and I think number 3, I want to give Albon for the impressive quali pace, but then the disqualification kind of blunders it completely away. So I'm just going to go with Norris and Charles, right? And from blunder drivers, I think I unfortunately, again, eating my own words, right? I have to give to Lewis, unfortunately, because the quali was off. His race pace was, as always, really good. Tyre whispered, managed them well, and then came back. But I think if he had started where Russell started, I think a podium was possible with Lewis's pace. Don't know. Again, just being a biased Lewis fan, right? So I think qualified let him down. And then another blunder of a driver is Hulk. Messed up the whole weekend, continued to go away. And I also want to say George, but I don't really know enough post-race to see whether it was a car issue or whether George's pace completely dropped and then he kind of crawled all the way from 4th back to almost Lewis's clutches, right? So that's another TBC. So blunders-wise, I'm just going to go Lewis and Hulk, right? In terms of teams, bangers, McLaren. I think brilliant, good strategy, safe, covered all bases. Even asked Norris is like, you're, I think it was 10 or 15 seconds ahead of Verstappen. If there was a safety car, we're going to pit you. Are you okay to go through, right? Like they covered all the bases. The pit stops were good. Strategy was on point, and the driver drove a wonderful race. PS3, I think he'll come back, clarify some of the things and get back to his rhythm next race. Number 2, banger team, Ferrari. I think they maximized, got back-to-back podiums, went from 6th to 3rd and 11th to 5th. That I think is really good. That they're starting to consolidate that 3rd spot in the Constructors' Championship as well. In terms of blunders, I think gonna go with Mercedes, because I think the overall hype of the car, especially me included, right? We thought that the car is going to be good in majority of the temperatures and tracks. They just fell back into that 4th spot, and there was not enough. There was too much sway in performance and still too peaky for the drivers to have complete confidence to achieve a much more closer to the front result. So Merc is one blunder, and I think it's the next one is Williams, really, right? It's difficult because I think the upgrades worked, but with the disqualification and then Logan just completely crashing and thrashing the car, they had no luck with points, right? It's a bit of a driver and a team blunder. All right, that's it for the race digest. Let's just do a quick race rating, right? In terms of track action, really, there were only a handful of moments that I was excited about. It was very much Lando on Verstappen, Oscar trying to overtake Charles, and then a few good moves from Lewis, and the kind of tire offset moments, and especially the Kevin Magnussen 5 car down the straight moment. But overall, track action was very, very minimal. So I'm going to go for a 5 out of 10. Strategy didn't really play a massive role because no safety cars, and the only scenario that you would have had a strategy difference is where you actually had a free pit window for the likes of Lewis Hamilton to grab the fastest lap, right? So strategy, I'd go 4 out of 10. Competitiveness, I think it was more dominance over competitiveness. So I think that just drops, and then you could clearly see where the first, second, third, and fourth teams, at least on the front end, battled out and settled, right? So not massively competitive in terms of the race win. So I'm going to go with a 6.5 out of 10 for that. And then last but not least, fans, I'm going to go with an 8 out of 10. It's got the Orange Army. They're always a crowd to be adored, with the max, super max. Right, so I think the crowd's awesome. So that gives the overall race a 5.9. It's not a complete snooze fest because it's really nice to see a new driver and a team showing dominance over Red Bull. So what do we think the rest of the seasons got in store for us? That's it for the Dutch Grand Prix Digest. And thank you very much, you beautiful people, for listening me all ramble on. Comment, like, and subscribe if you like the stuff in this video. And see you on the next one. Peace. Ciao.